Council. I am Councilmember Nicole Spear. Thank you for joining us. We have only one item on tonight's agenda. We'll hear information and have discussions on the City of Boulder 2026 recommended budget. Before we go into our work item, I would like to outline how the meeting will be conducted. We'll review the staff's presentations and then we'll have a time for questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll conduct our council discussion with staff and address their questions. If you have questions, please wait for staff to complete their presentation. Before I invite our city manager, Nuria Rivera-Vandermeide, to introduce our first item, I just want to say thank you to city staff, especially our police department and first responders, for your quick response at Fairview High School this morning. I'm sure I speak for all of us in saying we appreciate your support for impacted students, parents, and community members, and we're glad it was a false alarm. I know BVSD offers support for its students, teachers, and staff, and our city does the same for our staff. But if anyone else in community needs support, please be sure to visit the city's community mental health resources page at bouldercolorado.gov/services/community-mental-health-resources. I will now turn to our city manager, Nuria Rivera-Vandermeide, to add anything else about the response this morning and introduce our first item.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Spear. And I just wanted to echo the thanks to so many on our staff to do it, but really want to lift up our Boulder Police Department. They are not the only ones who responded, and I just want to point out our fire department, OSMP, a special shout out to our sheriff's department, and really lift up within our Boulder Police Department dispatch, who are really unsung heroes as they take in those first calls. But I want to say that as we lift up today's activity, and it is awful that we are living in a moment in which we are seeing more and more of these kind of calls come in across the nation and in our community. Our first responders do this today, they do this tomorrow, they will do this the next day, and just want to thank them for the work that they do all the time to safeguard our staff, our community, and just want to lift up the work that they do to keep us safe. I want to do a special shout out to Sergeant Brian Capobianco, who served as incident commander on today's call. So just thank you so much for the work that you do today and always to keep us safe, everyone. Shifting a moment, we will go to today's first item. And say that tonight is budget night, but as you know, it feels like for staff, every day is about budget. While we say we start in spring, the reality is that budget is based on work planning, and our work planning efforts have already kicked off for next year. So we're already thinking about the work to come. As for this budget, some on staff, and maybe some of you have heard me say that this budget, barring the pandemic, is truthfully the hardest budget I've ever worked on in my professional career. You always have to make hard choices in any budget cycle, but when you're faced with such hard trade-offs and you know that so many in community are facing difficult economic realities, it makes every budgetary decision that much tougher. I want to start by thanking the departments who dug deep with us and worked hard as we asked them to provide us with possible 5% reductions across the board so that we could consider all possible levers to achieve our goal of balancing the budget by reducing our $7.5 million gap in the general fund. It didn't mean we would shave 5% across every department, but rather that we needed to have every possible lever at our disposal to fully understand the possibilities and consequences when making budgeting decisions, as we knew we had to be thoughtful about reductions in this very tight budget year. They truly worked both independently and cross departments to see how they could find efficiencies throughout the organization and find ways to realign resources in ways that could yield some cost savings. There were two themes that were sort of critically important to me as the budget was being crafted. The first was making sure that we placed our people first. From staff to the community we served, it was critically important to me that ensured that we focused on the impact to individuals and families. While we knew we could not meet everybody's needs in this budget, we tried very hard to minimize impacts as much as possible. That meant trying hard to look across our programs and see where we could provide the best services to the most amount of people or to those in the community that are most vulnerable to the shocks and stressors of life. It also meant trying to ensure we would remain as competitive as we could within our financial means across the entire organization to retain and recruit our most valuable asset, our staff, without whom we could not serve the community we worked so hard for. The second was a continuing theme of leveraging every financial resource at our disposal. As the city has continued to financially mature, we, like so many other cities, have continued to leverage every fund to its full and intended purpose in order to liberate the general fund as much as possible. It's not a novel idea, as this was part of the recommendation provided from the Blue Ribbon Commission as well, but we have been continuing down that path to fully leveraging all our funds equally for the past few years. As you look at next year's budget, we also hope that you see all your budgetary decisions reflected in it. Your policy choices throughout the year, your council priorities, every ordinance you pass, it all impacts where our dollars go. And we try hard to make sure we reflect that policy guidance in our budget as we balance the ongoing operational needs of the organization and the programs and services we provide to the community. It's always hard to create a budget that can please everyone, and even harder in a year that continues to be constrained. But I think we have done our best to put forward a budget that is not only balanced, but focuses on our most important priorities in the coming year and ensures we have the people resources to carry the work forward. So with that, and a huge note of thanks to our staff, and in particular, and you'll hear this a lot, our budget team who have just done an extraordinary job this year, I'll pass it over to our CFO, Krista Morrison.
Well, good evening, members of City Council. Krista Morrison, Chief Financial Officer. As Nuria mentioned, this indeed has been a challenging budget year. Boulder, like most communities across our region and throughout the country, are facing slowing economic growth and flattening sources of revenue. This, combined with increases in the cost of services, place us in a position addressing an anticipated general fund shortfall of $10 million in the current fiscal year and $7.5 million shortfall in the 2026 budget development. The budget before you, as proposed, is balanced. To address the shortfall, this required a multifaceted approach, with departments submitting proposed reductions, realignments of resources, and review of performance data and outcomes. Tough trade-off conversations occurred, grounded in prioritizing community needs and alignment of services to support strategic plan goals. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to citywide department leadership and department financial staff. The annual budget proposed is the combined work of each and every city department, starting, as Nuria mentioned, as early as March of every year. I'd also like to thank our executive budget team. This consists of the city manager's office staff, department directors, some regular attendees, and some rotating. This team is formed to help support budget development and decision-making. This requires countless hours learning about the details of the budget. Most departments, directors, if not all, are on this evening, on this call to help support questions, and thank you for being here. I'd also like to extend gratitude and acknowledge the tremendous work of Budget Officer Charlotte Husky and the entire budget team. You'll recall hearing from Charlotte and our CU partners in May on the financial forecast, first sharing the deepening concern of flattening revenues. Since then, Charlotte and the budget team have managed unanticipated mid-year budget reductions for our current year budget, as well as addressing a shortfall in the 2026 budget. This required quick coordination with departments, a strategic approach to support informed decisions grounded in the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, and often long hours from this team to deliver analysis and information throughout the budget process. As challenging as it has been to balance the budget, Boulder is in a better position than many other cities throughout our region and the country. There are many cities facing personnel and service reductions. Boulder is in this position much in part due to the prioritization of this city council to include in its priorities long-term financial strategy. This is a multi-year focus in ensuring the city can provide services most important to this community and responding to the emerging needs of this community in the future. The importance of the long-term financial strategy work is highlighted in our current position. Boulder's largest revenue source, sales and use tax, a more volatile source of revenue with economic changes. This combined with 68% of the city's revenue is dedicated, reduces the flexibility to maintain services during periods of flattening or declining revenue, rising costs, and emerging community needs. We must continue ahead the work of the long-term financial strategy to diversify revenue and prioritize those services most critical to the community. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to our Finance Strategy Committee members, Council Members Spears, Wallach, and Schuhard, for your leadership in the long-term financial strategy. With that, I'll pass this over to Budget Officer Charlotte Husky to talk about the 2026 proposed budget.
Thank you, Krista. Good evening, council members. I'm Charlotte Husky, Budget Officer for the City of Boulder, and I will begin with sharing my screen. All right, good evening, council members. Charlotte Husky, Budget Officer for the City of Boulder. Good to be here with you this evening to share forward an overview of the 2026 recommended budget during this evening's council study session. During our presentation, we will focus on sharing an overview of our major budget assumptions that were considered as key considerations in our budgeting assumptions, bringing forward a balanced budget for 2026. We'll share forward an overview of our forecasted revenues incorporated into the 2026 budget, its impacts on budget development for this year, and share forward some additional detail on major revenue changes, including some additional other revenue changes that are incorporated into the 2026 budget. We will then share forward an overview of the 2026 recommended budget, and I'll just pause for a second. Mary, I see your hand up.
I apologize. I just want to make a note, council members, that we're experiencing some video issues with Channel 8 in case we have community members that are calling in. We are working on it right now, and we should be able to get that up shortly. Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte.
Thanks, Maria. So throughout this evening's presentation, picking up back where I left off, we'll share an overview of the 2026 recommended budget, focusing specifically first on the operating budget, and we'll share forward an overview of significant changes and budget highlights of the reductions, realignments, and few enhancements that are incorporated into the 2026 recommended budget by the 7 goal areas represented within the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. We'll then pivot to discuss and share an overview of the 6-year capital improvement program, sharing an overview of the CIP as a whole, and focusing in on major capital projects of capital investments across the 6-year horizon. And finally, we'll round out with funding outlook, community conversations to come, and future financial planning as part of the city's citywide initiative focusing on the long-term financial strategy. And we'll end this evening with council questions on the 2026 recommended budget. This first section will focus on the overview of our major budget assumptions incorporated into the 2026 recommended budget. We brought forward, as Krista mentioned in her intro, last to council, the financial forecast in May of this year, where we shared forward with council an overview of what we were seeing in our major revenue sources with our revenue forecast updates mid-year to help inform not only 2025, but 2026 budget development, where we were seeing a flattening of our major revenue sources, impacts of recent state legislation passed last year, in 2024 of September last year, and the economic uncertainty associated in impacting our sales and use tax, our major revenue source of sales and use tax, as well as the impacts of flattening of our major revenue sources and impacts of recent state legislation on property tax. Our other city revenues that we'll point to in the next few slides have also seen declining or plateauing, and that has impacted and contributed to a 7.5 million shortfall in the general fund that we identified mid-year as part of 2026 budget development if left unaddressed. Our federal and economic uncertainty since January 2025, economic uncertainty has remained steady, and this not only contributes impacts to our revenue forecasts, which we revised down for sales and use tax, but also focused on our federal funding for the city budget. And staff continues to closely monitor potential impacts to federal funds. And to date, the city has not received notification for cancellation or termination of any federal funds. As mentioned, the 2026 budget shortfall, we identified a 7.5 million shortfall in the general fund if left unaddressed. And this caused our budget direction for budget development to pivot and focus on shoring up this shortfall identified, particularly within the general fund, to bring forward a balanced budget to City Council this evening. We pivoted with emphasis in sharing forward with departments across the organization, all 18 departments, on bringing forward ongoing reductions, asking departments across the organization to identify 5% reduction strategies and programmatic realignments of dollars toward highest and best use, so that the executive budget team would be able to consider reduction strategies across the board during decision making. We also focused as part of budget direction for this year, continuing to take care of our existing assets and our capital infrastructure portfolio, as well as our core city services on the operating side. And as Nuria mentioned, with particular focus in the 2026 recommended budget, looking at flexibility across all funds and focusing in alignment with looking at our resources across all of our 39 budgeted funds across the organization to be able to bring forward a balanced budget to council this evening. Of heightened importance in the budget development and key considerations for this year included our work and effort across the last 4 years in budgeting for resilience and equity, as well as the work and effort we have put into the long-term financial strategy, where we have strengthened the organization's foundation for budgeting financial planning, as well as organizational resiliency. And as mentioned previously, this has positioned the city well compared to other organizations, particularly with the difficult challenge of bringing forward and shoring up the shortfall within the city's budget and bringing forward a balanced budget to City Council this evening. This next section will focus on our forecasted revenues that are in the 2026 budget, the impacts that we saw on budget development, and an overview of our major revenue changes that are within the forecasted 2026 revenues. As mentioned, the forecasted revenues for 2026 reflects slow revenue growth and continued uncertainty of economic conditions. Our total projected revenues that are incorporated into the 2026 budget is a total of $507.2 million, a modest 3% year-over-year increase compared to last year. And this is representative of the city's major revenue sources reflecting flattening and slowing growth compared to our original forecast. For sales and use tax, which comprises 35% of all city revenues, the year-over-year change is a 0.3% decline. And property tax, which comprises 12% of all city revenues, is a 3.1% year-over-year increase. And while this is an increase in property taxes year-over-year, it's important to note that this increase in reassessment cycles is the lowest that we have seen since 2011 and impacted our original revenue forecast with revision downward. And I'll share forward more detail on the upcoming slides. Some other notable changes to point out within our forecasted 2026 revenues include changes within affordable housing cash in lieu revenues, intergovernmental revenues, utility franchise fee, and state shared marijuana revenues. For the affordable housing cash in lieu, we're seeing and projecting a 30% year-over-year increase, driven by revenues anticipated to be received by residential projects in the pipeline. For intergovernmental revenues, the 2026 budget captures a 32% decrease, and this is primarily driven by the timeline of Colorado Department of Transportation grants received. Fewer grants are anticipated for 2026 than were received in 2025, and we are planning and incorporated into the out years larger grant revenues anticipated in the out years, primarily with funding received from Safe Streets for All federal funding. With the utility franchise fee, we're anticipating a decline of 6.7% year over year, driven by updated trend data. Into the 2024 year-end revenues saw a drop in natural gas usage, and this updated information and on historical trends has been incorporated into our associated revenues for 2026. And then finally, with state shared marijuana revenues, we're projecting a 69% ongoing decrease, which represents a decrease of $405,000 on an ongoing basis due to state legislation impacts on state shared marijuana revenues that was passed in this year's state session. And the city has been impacted with this legislation since July of 2025. On the next two slides, I'll share forward specific graphs on sales and use tax and property tax within the general fund. And as mentioned earlier, staff forecasted a $7.5 million shortfall in the general fund for 2026. And so these next two slides will focus specifically on the general fund forecasts. For sales and use tax, the slide here represents our updated revised forecast received in 2025, received in July of 2025, that continue to project slowing growth, flattening revenues due to economic uncertainty. Specific to the general fund, we saw the largest impacts. We're seeing the largest impacts in 2025, contributing to the shortfall that Krista mentioned, and in 2026. In 2025, within the general fund, this is a shortfall of 1.4 million against original forecasts, and 1.9 million in 2026, with the uptick beginning in 2027. We are continuing to work with our partners at CU to look at updated forecasts throughout the year, and we'll continue that into next year as well as we begin budget planning for next year as well. For the general fund forecast for property tax, this graph represents our property tax original forecast compared to our revised forecast, again, contributing to the ongoing shortfall within the general fund for 2026. As we shared forward at the financial forecast with City Council in May, we received updated reassessment values from Boulder County earlier this year, which showed flat actual value growth, which ended up lowering our base for our property tax projections moving forward and beginning with impacts in 2026 and moving forward from there. This was impacted primarily by state legislative impacts that were passed by the state legislature in September of last year, HB 24B 101, impacting revenue growth as well as flat growth seen where we hadn't seen that low of reassessment since the housing crisis in 2011. Our out year projections for property tax sit at 5% for reassessment periods. And finally, rounding out on our forecasted 2026 revenues as part of the city's work with a long-term financial strategy, which is a key part of this strategy, focuses on reducing over-reliance of sales and use tax, as well as increasing revenue diversity and stability of city revenues. The 2026 recommended budget incorporates enhanced revenue measures and alternative funding mechanisms. These include the transportation maintenance fee at 2.25 million, which has been long studied as a sustainable funding source for transportation maintenance, such as bridges, streets, and sidewalks. It incorporates a modest increase in on-street and garage parking fees, estimated at 800,000, with a 50-cent hourly increase in line with our performance-based pricing model for parking within the city. It also incorporates speed on grade photo enforcement consistent with the city's Vision Zero goals, traffic safety goals, at a total of 2.6 million in the 2026 budget. And finally, it incorporates a single family housing expansion or impact fee for a total of 400,000. That is a $15 per square foot for significant expansions of single unit dwellings within Boulder. So focusing now on the 2026 recommended budget overview and sharing forward an overview of our budget comparison between 2019 and 2026, and then sharing forward our significant changes of reductions, enhancements, few enhancements, as well as programmatic realignments by goal area. This slide and graph focuses, yes.
I apologize. I just need to alert council. We are experiencing problems with our Zoom server that we have not been able to resolve for now. It means that we are recording this session, but it is not broadcasting on channel 8 nor on YouTube. The meeting is recording, so we will be able to put it up on YouTube eventually. And we are working on it behind the scenes as furiously as we can. So council, I don't know if you want us to continue or take a quick pause to see if we can try to fix it, knowing that staff is working furiously and hard to attend to the issue.
Thank you. Thanks, Nuria. Do you want to do like a just quick straw poll, council, on preference of continue on, knowing it'll be available on YouTube, or take a pause so that we can get channel 8 fixed? So if you would like to take a pause and try to get channel 8 fixed, please raise your hand. Okay, and everybody else, I'm assuming you are good with continuing to go. Okay. Okay. Let's continue on. And my only thing would be, unless there are any, there's anything in our code that says that we really need to have channel 8 going or anything like that.
Councilmember Spear, there's no such requirement.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
We commit to putting this up as soon as possible and uploading it as soon with all expediency.
Okay, thank you. And maybe check in again if it gets to a point where it would be easier to fix channel 8 if the meeting weren't currently going.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. Sorry, Charlotte, for
All good. Let me
roll.
get situated again. Second. Okay. So this next section will focus on an overview of the 2026 recommended budget, specifically focusing on a budget comparison between 2019 and 2026 and the changes seen throughout that time, and then focusing on our operating budget by goal area, focusing on significant changes of reductions, realignments, and the few enhancements incorporated into the 2026 budget as aligned to the sustainability, equity, and resilience goal area. This slide and graph focuses on the comparison of the adopted budget from 2019 through the 2026 recommended budget presented to council this evening. We can see that post-pandemic in 2021 and through 2023, there was strong revenue growth and associated new ongoing funding investments were placed into homelessness initiatives, behavioral health programming, wildfire resilience efforts, public safety, and affordable housing, to name a few. The city began to see flattening of sales and use tax revenues in 2023 and focused on strategic use of one-time fund balance and investments in 2024 and in 2025. The city's revenues were further impacted by economic uncertainty and state legislation in 2025, resulting in an identified shortfall and needing to reduce and balance the budget for the 2026 recommended budget, particularly in the general fund. This chart shows for the 2026 recommended budget, as seen in the graph, declines and slowing growth compared to prior fiscal years. For the citywide budget, which is the top line here, there's a 11.6% year-over-year decrease, and this is driven primarily by slowing operating growth as well as reduced year-over-year capital investments due to project timing and funding availability. Our citywide operating budget, which is shown in this middle yellow line here, is a 2.1% increase, and it represents the slowest operating growth in the budget since 2021. And finally, our general fund budget is a 7.8% decrease year over year, and this decline is driven primarily, as mentioned, by flattening of our major revenue sources, as well as reduced use of one-time investments to bring forward a balanced budget and a balanced general fund, and ensuring fund sustainability and fiscal health across the city and across the organization. The 2026 recommended operating budget totals $407.7 million and supports investments across all 7 goal areas within the city's sustainability, equity, and resilience framework. This alignment is a reflection of the city's resources and dollars across all goal areas, in alignment with the work that we have done as an organization over the past 4 years with budgeting for resilience and equity, where we have aligned our resources across this greater framework and have continued to utilize program performance data, historical trends, and outcomes data to drive budget decision making. This work also continues to uplift and advance the citywide strategic plan, priority actions and strategies, and also the priorities of City Council identified in early 2024. This budget also utilized existing community engagement input from 2024 and 2025, where we received valuable input from communities and community connectors and residents, as well as input from over 1,000 community members received last year in our citywide budget questionnaire. And as mentioned previously, given the financial landscape developing the 2026 recommended budget, the 2026 budget comprises and includes reductions, realignments, and few enhancements to support community priorities and core city services. The next several slides will share forward the significant changes and budget highlights by SARE goal area that are incorporated into the 2026 recommended budget. And with that, I will pass it off to our principal budget analyst in the budget office, Scott Carpenter, to provide an overview of these changes.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good evening, Council. Scott Carpenter, Principal Budget Analyst. Over the next few slides, I'm going to highlight changes within the 2026 budget by sustainability, equity, and resilience goal. Starting with responsibly governed, there are changes to facilities maintenance and risk management. In 2026, there is a proposed one-time reduction in funding of $59,000 towards custodial services to city offices, reducing building cleaning from 5 days a week to 3 days, and an ongoing reduction of current building replacement funding of $101,000, which will mean fewer dollars towards sustainable replacement funding in the long term. The city is funding $85,000 for a new risk management system, supporting heightened data transparency of city liability and workers' compensation in alignment with the citywide strategic plan, strategy 3, priority action A, with the ultimate goal of preventing and mitigating potential losses. This is $50,000 ongoing with $35,000 for one-time implementation costs. For the SAFE goal, the city is proposing a reorganization to behavioral health programming. Based on 2 years of programmatic and outcome data, which provided valuable insights on program performance, the 2026 budget proposes reducing the community assistance response and engagement program and resources of 3 FTE and for roughly $438,000, and reorganizing remaining staffing resources, which is 4 FTE and $483,000, into a cross-functional behavioral health response team. Data demonstrated that while the CARE program responded to an average of less than 1 call per day, the additional staffing enabled responses to 2,274 behavioral health crisis calls in 2024, an increase of 60% compared to 2023. The reorganized team of clinicians and case managers will continue to provide high-quality, flexible, cross-functional staffing response to crisis calls. Clinicians will be accompanied by a police officer when conditions required, when conditions require, but have the option to respond with other behavioral health staff when an officer is not needed. Additionally, there is $506,000 in one-time funding, which will support the extension of 4 fixed-term investigative specialists and 1 fixed-term victim service specialist to advance outcomes of efficient management of criminal investigations and improve community connections to non-policing. Under the livable goal, there is a proposed realignment of city services to advance the recently updated homelessness strategy that aims to streamline certain services toward more coordinated care across the full homelessness system. Included in the 2026 budget are several key changes: reducing the duplication of outreach services by removing the Boulder Targeted Homeless Engagement and Referral Effort program funding, also known as Be There, which can be supported by other nonprofit partners. This will allow All Roads to continue its focus on in-shelter navigation services, leveraging remaining state DOLA grant funds to allow for a one-time reduction in direct city contributions for the Day Services Center, ending some municipal court case management services for people without active municipal cases, eliminating the Bridge House contract for ready-to-work graduate housing support. Instead, the agency can continue to submit applications for competitive grants through the Human Services Fund. In addition, the city will support efforts to end unsheltered homelessness by allocating funding for the Building Home program, which ensures that new residents of permanent housing continue to be connected to peer support and a dedicated retention team, preventing a return to homelessness. The city will utilize $275,000 from a one-time balance in the Eviction Prevention and Rental Assistance Services Fund, as remaining ARPA funds are substantially limited. Continuing support for the Urban Park Rangers and the Safe and Managed Public Spaces program, also known as SAMPS, but with a reduction in staffing for SAMPS achieved through a reduction of 2 existing vacancies to reflect the current operational demand and signal a transition to more proactive solutions. $26.9 million to support several housing projects in 2026, including the 3300 Penrose project with 113 affordable units, the completion of the Hawthorne Court project with 73 affordable units, and continued developments at the Ponderosa neighborhood with homes built from Boulder Mod, the affordable housing modular factory. Aligned with the healthy and socially thriving goal within the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Fund, there is over $2.4 million in arts funding for cultural events, operating arts grants, public art installations, and preparation for implementation of the Arts Blueprint in early 2026. $45,000 one-time funding for the Arts Blueprint. There is $250,000 in Youth Opportunities Program and one-time funding to advance the Child Friendly Cities Initiative for youth programming. Funding was received from the sale of the Denver Broncos in the amount of $2 million and pulled from management reserves within the general fund to support this work. For the environmentally sustainable goal, the budget proposes a realignment of a portion of the Fire Rescue Wildland Unit team in the amount of $502,000 to be supported by open space revenues, where this team spends 90% of staff time on wildfire response and mitigation efforts such as prescribed burns or wildfire training. There is a total of $1.6 million in climate tax funding that will advance wildfire resilience efforts and build upon citywide strategic plan goals. Strategy 2, priority actions A and C, $340,000 for the continuation of the implementation of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, $450,000 for the Community Wildfire Resilience Assistance Program that provides grants to homeowners for wildfire mitigation, and $123,000 of support for the realignment of a fire rescue community risk reduction specialist with the goal of reduced risk of wildfire to vulnerable homes and increased community preparedness through wildfire education and resilience grants. This funding is a small portion of the total wildfire prevention and resilience funding across the city, including within department budgets of open space and mountain parks, fire rescue, and the planning and development services departments, to name a few. In alignment with the economically vital goal, the budget proposes funding for Sundance Film Festival preparation and the Ambassador Program. One-time investments of $2 million are planned for transportation security and venue support to prepare to host Sundance in January 2027. $500,000 in one-time funding for the continuation of the Downtown Ambassador Program, providing hospitality, safety, and cleaning services within the Business Improvement District, the Civic Area, and University Hill. And last but not least, aligned to the accessible and connected goal is a realignment of $131,000 to extend a fixed term position in programmatic funding supporting continued equitable engagement efforts of the community connectors and residents in alignment with the citywide plan. The funding realignments to continue support for this program will discontinue the city's neighborhood grants program and produce one print city newsletter a year instead of two. Data related to the grant program show that some of the neighborhoods receiving funding could likely support some community building opportunities without assistance, and those with economic limitations could potentially be supported differently in the future. In addition, the grants, relatively small sums, took significant staff time to administer. By freeing up this person's time, the department will be able to reduce consultant contracts associated with other priorities. There is a proposed $59,000 reduction to the park-to-park shuttle operations based on usage data trends since the Chautauqua Access Management Plan and park-to-park. Inception in 2018, the 2026 budget includes an operational change to the park-to-park shuttle that transports community members from satellite locations and parking lots to Chautauqua Park. The proposed change includes updating the pickup frequency from every 15 minutes to every 30 minutes, as well as removing two of the satellite parking lots that have the lowest number of parking spaces along the route, that is the CU Regent lot and the New Vista lot. I will now turn it back to Charlotte to provide an overview of the proposed 2026 through 2031 capital improvement program.
Thanks, Scott. All right, so this next section will focus on an overview of the 6-year CIP, as well as share forward examples of major capital project investments across the 6-year horizon from 2026 to 2031. So sharing forward first, and an overview across the entire capital improvement program for the 6-year horizon is sharing forward this graph. The 2026 to 2031 CIP identifies all planned capital improvement projects and their estimated costs across the 6-year horizon. For 2026, this includes a total of $113.3 million in new appropriation incorporated and brought forward for council consideration this evening and in October. This will support in 2026 a total of 115 capital projects, and across the 6-year horizon will support 173 capital projects for a total planned spending of $789.5 million across the 6-year horizon. This graph provides an overview of the full CIP broken down by department at the bottom, seen at the bottom by year, and by fund, with specific capital project highlights highlighted for each department capital improvement program across 19 funds that support capital investments across the 6-year capital improvement program. For community vitality, we can see the CAGED Fund or the Downtown General Improvement District Fund will support garage renovations in 2026 and in 2027, primarily for the Spruce Garage and the Walnut Garage. For the Facilities and Fleet Department, the Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax Fund will support the replacements of fire stations 2 and 4 across the 6-year horizon, as well as renovations at the East Boulder Community Center. For innovation and technology incorporated into the 6-year CIP are investments in the constituent relationship management project, which will essentially serve as the city's service desk, central service desk, when the city shifts to, in preparation for the shift to the Western City campus. And this is supported primarily by the Enterprise Technology Fund across the 6-year horizon. For the Open Space and Mountain Parks Department, the Open Space Fund will support agricultural fields and prairie dog conflict projects, as well as projects supporting restoration of riparian and wetlands within open space lands. For Parks and Recreation, the CCRS Fund will support the Civic Area Phase 2 project, and the Permanent Parks Fund will support parks, restrooms, and asset management, including parks, restrooms, picnic shelters, and parks regional facilities. For transportation and mobility, we can see at the top here, the Transportation Fund will primarily support the Safe Streets for All projects moving forward and the Pavement Management Program. And then finally, for utilities, within 3 funds that primarily support the capital improvement program, the Wastewater Utility Fund will support the Transmission System Repair Project. The Water Utility Fund will support the Transmission System Repair Project. The Wastewater Utility Fund will support the Arapahoe Trunk Sewer Replacement Project. And then finally, the Stormwater Fund will support across the 6-year horizon Upper Goose Creek improvements as reflected on this chart. And now I'll turn it back to Scott Carpenter to share forward an overview of some key capital projects that are incorporated into the 6-year CIP.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So for the 2026 through 2031 capital improvement program, there is $1.7 million in 2026 and $3.5 million in total budget for an improved customer experience through a new constituent relationship management system, the city's central help desk, for quicker and consistent service. In addition, the Western City campus will open in 2027. The remaining capital project funding was approved by City Council last year and as a part of the special ATB in May, accepting the proceeds from the certificates of participation. The Western City campus will consolidate 9 city offices into one central hub, providing improved customer service for community members and greater collaboration and efficiency opportunities across departments, and importantly, operational savings by moving out of costly and aging city buildings. For the Civic Area Phase 2 project, there is $3.5 million in 2026 and $18 million in total project budget for park renovations and enhancements within the east end of the Civic Area Park. Debt issuance is expected to come forward using CCRS sales and use tax revenues to support the debt for this project. There is $25 million to replace Fire Station 2 at Broadway
I'm
and
sorry,
Baseline.
Scott. We seem to have echoes in the background.
Is it coming from me?
I am not hearing anything on my end, but I'm not sure if others are hearing.
Yeah, I haven't been hearing any echoes.
Better now? Still happening now?
Think you're probably okay, Scott?
Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll restart. $25 million to replace Fire Station 2 at Broadway and Baseline, responding to approximately 2,300 calls a year. Land was purchased adjacent to the current station. Construction will start in 2026 with an opening in 2027. For Primos Park development and the Violet Avenue Bridge replacement, $4.5 million in 2026, and $8 million total project budget for the development of the park and its amenities, stormwater improvements, replacement of the Violet Avenue Bridge in North Boulder between Broadway and 19th Streets, adjacent to the Boulder Meadows neighborhood. There is funding for improvements and renovations to the downtown parking garages, specifically the Spruce and Walnut garages, for key maintenance and repairs, improving safety and longevity of the structures used by downtown visitors, residents, and businesses. These projects are being paid for by funds from the Downtown Commercial District, which is restricted for uses within the district. There is $3 million in 2026 and $3.2 million project budget for the Pearl Street Mall refresh to support capital maintenance upgrades and temporary installations along Pearl Street between 11th to 15th Street. Planned to complete ahead of the 50th anniversary celebration in 2027. There is $600,000 in annual capital investments for fuel mitigation efforts along ditch corridors and performing forest thinning and vegetation management within the wildland-urban interface and on open space lands. For wildfire resilience, there is $46.6 million to improve the city's water transmission system, such as replacing undersized water pipelines and rehabilitating the historic 1923 Chautauqua water storage tank and adding a new water storage tank in East Boulder to increase capacity of the city's drinking water infrastructure. And I will now turn it back over to Charlotte to provide an overview of projects within the Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax Fund.
All right, thanks, Scott. So sharing an overview of the projects and the breakdown across the 6-year horizon for the Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax Fund. This chart provides a breakdown of the spend by project across the 6-year horizon. And you can see investments of $97.6 million across the 6-year CIP, supporting 9 capital projects, including the replacement of Fire Station 2 beginning in 2026 and anticipated completion in 2027, East Boulder Community Center in 2027 and 2028, the Civic Area Phase 2 project, bridge replacement projects such as Central Avenue Bridge, as well as Violet Avenue Bridge as part of the Primos Park project that Scott highlighted. And to note, as part of the Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax, the tax is broken down by 90% city projects and 10% community nonprofit grants, which is also incorporated across the CIP. These projects have been incorporated based on community-facing projects, community investments, as well as criticality, such as the critical replacement of Fire Stations 2 and 4. It's important to note that this represents the upcoming 6-year horizon across the existing CCRS tax, and that the existing tax has supported several key capital projects already, including the completion of Fire Station 3, the full acquisition of the city's streetlights, and multimodal improvements along main transportation corridors of 28th and 30th Streets. As we've mentioned previously, the 2026, we anticipate utilizing existing CCRS tax revenues in 2026 and in 2027. Debt issuances planned for Civic Area Fire Station 2 and East Boulder Community Center. And the next phase of planning for the CCRS revenues will be determined by the outcome of the 2025 CCRS ballot measure on the ballot this November. Rounding out the presentation with an overview of the long-term financial strategy of funding outlook, community conversations to come, and financial planning. The long-term financial strategy was named a City Council top priority in 2024, and the long-term financial strategy builds upon prior policy recommendations received from the Blue Ribbon Commission reports of 2008 and 2010, and focuses on taking care of what we have, addressing a backlog of needs, prioritizing the flexibility of funding as we have done within the 2026 recommended budget to meet community needs, recognizing the challenges of restricted funding. It focuses on the coordination of tax ballot measures within broader city financial planning, including identifying and incorporating alternative funding mechanisms into the city budget and building upon our work of outcomes-based budgeting and distributing the tax burden more equitably. With policy guidance received from the Financial Strategy Committee as well as City Council, staff advanced the long-term financial strategy in 2025 by developing a multi-year ballot measure strategy framework for 2025 and 2026. This includes a 2025 ballot measure of 0.3% permanent extension of the Community Culture Resilience and Safety Tax, as well as an increase in associated debt capacity utilizing revenues from sales and use tax revenues from the CCRS tax. As part of the work for 2025 and mid-year development of the 2026 recommended budget, staff analyzed and incorporated alternative revenue sources within the 2026 budget brought forward to council this evening, including, as mentioned previously, the transportation maintenance fee for critically underfunded and unfunded transportation maintenance, a modest increase to parking fees for on-street and parking garages, the implementation of speed on green cameras, supporting Vision Zero safety, traffic safety goals, and the single family housing impact fee that would help to offset affordable housing needs. The 2026 budget and work on the long-term financial strategy also enabled the city to conduct and publish the city's first comprehensive fee inventory representing work performed across the organization. And this is incorporated and published in the 2026 recommended budget and will moving forward, containing a comprehensive inventory of all of the city fees across the organization. And finally, we developed engagement framework for Fund Our Future community conversations on trade-offs and service levels plan to come forward in 2026 for community conversations. So next steps on the 2026 recommended budget is highlighted here on October 9th and 23rd, where we will focus on first reading and public hearing on October 9th. And with any council budget amendments similar to prior years, if any come forward to sheriff via hotline by October 6th, and ensuring a balanced budget, recognizing the balancing that has been incorporated into the 2026 recommended budget brought forward to council. Any amendment should include an identified offset, and the budget office is available to support. Our final second reading and public hearing and budget adoption is planned to take place October 23rd, with staff bringing forward the 2026 budget ordinances and the special district resolutions across the 7 special districts supporting the city. And finally, council questions for this evening. We have 2 shared forward, including what questions do council members have on the 2026 recommended budget and next steps? And do council members have any recommended, do council members recommend any substantive changes in advance of the first reading consideration of the 2026 recommended budget on October 9th? And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Nicole.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Charlotte, and just the immense amount of work, everyone that has gone into this. It's quite incredible. So let's start with your first question, which was basically just, do we have questions about the recommended budget? So colleagues, if you would like to raise your hand, and then we can save comments for later and just kind of stick to staff's questions for now. So what questions do council members have on the 2026 recommended budget and next steps? Okay, I see you come up first, Ryan, then Tara and Tina.
Thank you. I believe I have 2 questions. Earlier on in the presentation, there was a pie chart that showed the budgeting by outcomes. It was a pie chart. And I was just, I don't know if you're able to show that. You don't have to, actually. I'll just describe what I saw. So it has the different outcomes for the strategic plan, and most of those outcomes, the budgets for them were pretty similar in terms of size, just roughly. But one was very small, which I think was economic vitality, and one was very large, which I believe was responsibly governed. And I was just wondering if the team could share any design thinking around that. Like, for example, are we ultimately just moving them to be roughly equal, or are there reasons why we should want some to be smaller or larger?
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member. So as you know, the responsibly governed and the safe comprise the majority of the breakdown of the city's budget and resources, and it's similar to the breakdown from last year with the 2025 budget. One of the items that we have continued to work on as part of the work and efforts of budgeting for resilience and equity is understanding the alignment of our dollars and our resources and how programs align to each of the 7 goal areas. And so this is work that we continue to refine year after year. We will continue to refine this moving forward. This includes looking at the definitions of our programs across all departments, and recognizing whether or not there might be shifts moving forward in the definitions of those programs. To your point, in terms of the development of the city budget utilizing outcomes and goals, we have utilized, as Scott shared forward in the presentation, programmatic outcome data as aligned to the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, programmatic trend data, historical data, to be able to utilize that information for decision making in the 2026 budget. Some examples shared forward for that were the behavioral health response realignments and reductions that were performed, as well as the programmatic and operational data that we saw coming forward in the park to park programmatic change.
If I may, Charlotte, I'll just add too. I'm not surprised. It's a question I got from another council member, Councilmember Schuhart. I'm not surprised that you're seeing economically vital a smaller percentage. Historically, the city has not done a lot in the area of economic development, I'm going to say, now that we can say the word more broadly. And I think that number is going to change as we explore things like DDA or possibly, I know Metro District has been something on your mind, but as we explore more in that area, I think you're going to see that number change a little bit. Responsibly governed is an area where we think of, it depends on what projects are coming in a particular year. Alpine balsam, asset management, as we think about the 1.7 in a new CRM system. When those projects that have to do with technology that have huge dollars amounts to them, you see a shift in responsibly governed that have high price tags attached to them. In a year where that is not the case and we don't have those projects, you may see some of those dollars shift in a different way. When we look at SAFE, which certainly has a big percentage, a lot of people think of that as our first responders, police and fire. When we think of SAFE, we think too of our Vision Zero goals. We think a lot of wildfire resilience. So those numbers may shift as we move forward, and it depends on the projects that are moving forward in a particular year. So you have to peel back the layers to look and see what that looks like.
Thank you. And I just have one more question. So in the approach to making budget reductions, my impression is that the team has been purposeful about trimming across the whole organization in a balanced way in order to leave us with good chances of programs bouncing back when the economy improves, rather than having concentrated deep reductions in places that would make it hard for programs to recover from. But I'm not sure if you said that exactly, so I wanted to ask. Can you just talk about this, and I guess also specifically, are there any programs that we should expect they're really not likely to be coming back after this exercise?
Thank you for the question, council member. We incorporated several reductions as part of the challenge of bringing forward the balanced budget to city council this evening. We looked across the 2026 budget and balancing the budget and bringing forward realignments across the board and programs across the board. There are a handful of programs that come to mind in thinking about the reorganization and realignment. As we mentioned, in the behavioral health space, we did perform and took a look utilizing outcomes data and trend data and reduced staffing associated with the care program and have realigned staffing toward shared behavioral health response team that will be able to respond with or without police. We have shared forward the support of one-time funding to be able to support previously ARPA funding, ARPA funded programming in the Building Home program that Scott shared forward as part of a significant change that's incorporated into the 2026 budget. There are several programs that are incorporated in that fashion and in that nature. And another one to share forward is the reduction of the Safe and Managed Spaces program, the 2 FTE, vacant FTE that were reduced and incorporated. That reduction was incorporated into the 2026 recommended budget. And staff will continue to monitor if needing operations and support in that space in the future to be able to look for potentially utilizing funding to support those units for safe and managed spaces operations moving forward.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you, Charlotte. Nuria.
Thanks, Ryan. Tara, you're up, then Tina and Matt.
Okay, 1 second. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Did I never even shut off my mic? That's a problem today. Okay. First of all, while we're talking about safe and managed spaces, can someone tell us if losing 2 FTEs is going to have an impact, a big impact on the way our spaces are managed now?
Thank you for thank you for the question, council member. One of the reasons why the executive budget team during decision making for the 2026 recommended budget incorporated and took a look at staffing and program data across the board. This decision was made based on recognizing that the reduction of the 2 vacant FTEs will not have a significant impact on operations for safe and managed spaces moving forward. It is something that the city will continue to monitor with the reduction of that staffing, but with the existing staffing and the units on hand, the city performed that decision utilizing the data and recognizing that there would not be a significant anticipated impact and change to operations and cleanups in those areas for safe and managed spaces.
Okay. So the second question, and my really only other question, has to do with the list of fees. I'm looking at the fee paid by typical business / individual, and I'm wondering, I'm not a fan of lots of fees. I believe that they affect, cities economically by dissuading businesses from coming, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to ask why some of these fees really jumped, and I'm just going to name them, and I'm sure there are reasons. That's why I'm asking. Boulder Junction Garage had a double. The downtown garage short-term parking, well, we heard about that, and we had a big jump in the events permits. in the class 1 special event fee and in the class 2 special event fee specifically. And then we had big jumps because it went from nothing to something, nothing to 500 in the large film production and medium film production. So most of our fees didn't really increase hardly at all. So I'm curious why these had such big jumps.
Thank you for the question, council member. And this is these are the fees that are incorporated into the comprehensive fee inventory page and associated with community vitality fees. Happy to defer and bring someone on from community vitality if helpful to share forward details on the changes to the fees. But I know that as part of the annual fee development process for existing fees, the city looks across our existing fees, recognizing that there might be changes on an annual basis. Community Vitality is one of those departments that performs that, and I see Chris popped up.
Good evening, City Council. Chris Jones, Director of Community Vitality here. Sorry, my computer was having some challenges, so I'm on my phone. But thank you for the question. The fees that have been proposed associated with special events come as a result of a lot of work we've been doing compared to other communities. We have not traditionally charged fees for events and the film permits. We've done a lot of work as a result of the social streets analysis that went on post-COVID. And so these were fees that are being proposed. We do not necessarily have to start implementing them, but they are our recommended changes, just benchmarking to other communities. So as associated with a lot of other fees that we have been looking at as a way to help close budget gaps.
So like a tax, because we have our budgets, we can't afford things. Check. All right.
Councilmember Weiner, I want to be very clear. Fees are not taxes.
Yeah, I
There's
said like a tax, not a tax, but like a tax. Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Tara. Tina, then Matt and Mark.
Hi, thanks. I first wanted to ask just about the long-term financial strategies in taxing, because I was thinking about how in 2027, it's possible there won't be a ballot sent out if the school board races are uncontested, as we won't have a city council race. And that's not an unusual event. And I'm just curious if we have a long-term plan to do polling and understanding what it looks like to run multiple tax measures on a much more crowded ballot alongside county and state taxes. Kind of what is our strategy for understanding that we may be now down to 2 different cycles per 4 years to run taxes?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Marquez. Part of the work that we perform in the long-term financial strategy and in work and with guidance from both the Financial Strategy Committee and City Council, and we developed the multi-year ballot measure strategy framework, considering what other potential taxes might be on the ballot, including county taxes or taxes from other jurisdictions. That was something that we considered incorporating as part of the polling for this year, that we brought forward the polling results to City Council mid-year this year. It is something that we will certainly discuss as staff and consideration for thinking about planning of tax measures moving forward. And so we have thought about that previously as part of the work with the long-term financial strategy, and we'll continue to think about the coordination of taxes, ensuring that we are balancing what we're bringing forward, and to be informed by polling survey results as we performed this year as well. That is our plan for next year as well, and what we intend to consider and bring forward to City Council for 2026. We have not developed a tax ballot measure strategy at this point past 2026. but know that it is something that we'll be considering and thinking about as we're thinking about broader financial planning efforts as part of the long-term financial strategy.
Okay, and we're able to do polling that would also include statewide tax initiatives as well, so that we can try to get some information on what it's like if there's a county, a city, and a state tax all at the same time.
It is something that we could consider polling on and incorporating into a statistically valid poll. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then my other question is on the change in the way that we're thinking about spending the money from the proceeds of the sale of the Broncos. Is that something where what are the outcomes attached to this year's $250,000 investment in that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member. For the 250,000 that's incorporated into the 2026 budget, we have incorporated a total amount to support, I believe it's about 115,000 that's incorporated to support a fixed term limited position, and then the remainder for programmatic funding, and know that the Parks Department is considering and thinking about the programmatic outcomes associated with the program, and see that Director Allie Rhodes has hopped on, so I'll toss to Allie.
Thanks, Charlotte. Good evening, folks. I'm Allie Rhodes, Director of Parks and Recreation. I actually think you hit it, Charlotte. So Councilmember Marquis, was there a part of your question we could share a little bit more, or did that get there?
Yes, I think that it would just be good to, I do have concerns about some of the families that are struggling in the community, the youth in particular, and this funding I know needs to be geared toward youth. So, I think that this budget has done such a good job of identifying high needs, high impact areas. And I hope that this is consistent with that theme and just ensuring that we have needs that we may not understand right now. And I just want to make sure that that this funding is a little bit flexible. So hopefully it can address a high impact need. And I assume that's part of the process.
Absolutely. And, council saw a draft of the action plan in May and issues that young people identified as most important. And that action plan will be completed through this fall and into the winter, and it'll allow for current state assessment that I think will address some of what you're talking about the current state. And happy to follow up more offline if helpful.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. And then another question is, we're moving the Bridge House from a contract to the competitive grant process. Is that something that we want to do more in general, just from granting, or do we generally prefer to get a contract that has through a request for services or an RFP process? What is the longer term vision and how we distribute and meet the needs that our human services funds are intended to meet in our community?
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member. And it was part of the difficult decision making as part of the 2026 bringing forward a balanced budget, and know that HHS was very intentional of having a closed round and thinking about the organizations impacted and where the funding is, where the investments are going, and see that Deputy Director of Housing and Human Services has popped up to share some additional information as well.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth Crow, Deputy Director of Housing and Human Services. Appreciate the question. Right now, without changing anything, we do have the option, even within our competitive funding programs, to do kind of annual single year grants, multi-year grants, which now are 3 years and over. Since 2019, when we put that strategy in place, we've actually had quite a few agencies receive 3 years of funding, which is easier for them, way better for us as well. We also have the opportunity to do non-competitive grants, which is how we provide funds to EFA for the Keep Families Housed program, off cycle. So we have a lot of different kind of methods in place that we can draw upon to make sure we're really staying on top of the needs in the community and working with our nonprofit agencies that are helping deliver those services to just make that process as efficient as possible. The grant, some of these are contracts, and I think the agreements and the contracts that the city has with all roads are just a good example where the level of detail and kind of the dollar amount associated with the contracts are such that we would not be putting those through a competitive process. So I think right now we do have such a wide range of options to draw upon to meet those needs that we don't necessarily see it a reason to change at this point.
Is there a way to see which grants are in competitive versus non-competitive processes? Is that broken out?
Yes, so every year, once we make those grant decisions, once they're approved by the city manager, we do post them online. Can certainly make that more clear directly to council when that information is available. There are right now not very many non-competitive grants. There's 2 that I can think of off the top of my head. The contracts, such as through homeless services, is another question, but there too, we can provide that information.
Okay, thanks.
No
And then I have
problem.
one last question, which is when we consolidate to Alpine, is there any place that describes the properties that we'll be disposing of and what any kind of anticipated revenue will be from that disposal of property?
We do have the list of the 9 offices that will be consolidating, and I'll need to lean on Deputy Director of Facilities and Fleet to remind us of the consolidation. And we have incorporated total sale of buildings and revenue that's reflected and incorporated into the out years in the governmental capital fund at about 10 million, which would be reassessed and revalued closer to the date of sale. So I'll toss to Michelle.
Yeah, good afternoon, council, or evening. Michelle Crane, Deputy Director of Facilities and Fleet. And again, I think, Charlotte, you kind of hit on, I think, the question. We have identified the 9 buildings that we're looking to consolidate. I think we have some additional opportunities beyond that. In our facilities plan and elsewhere, we've, some of those properties, like the Park Central New Britain building, will be deconstructed and go to Parks Land. But then, as Charlotte mentioned, the other properties that have value are being assessed right now. But until we vacate and until that timing is there, we don't know the actual kind of revenue that we'll receive. But it's being budgeted, and we're working with the budget office to count that.
But it's mostly accounted for, or roughly accounted for. So we won't be expecting a big bump in 1 or 2 years. Is that correct? It's kind of baked in.
No, but we do anticipate potentially a help to reduce our debt service. So that would be a reduction, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Great. Then we've got Matt, then Mark, then Taisha.
Thanks, Nicole. Great presentation, and just admirable job to get us to where we are. So I mean, no easy task for sure. A couple questions. One pertains to kind of where we're maybe leaving money on the table. And this is a question about the airport. Given our lawsuit and now no longer accepting or pursuing FAA grants, how much is the general fund compensating for what otherwise would have been funded by grants?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. At this point in time, the general fund is not contributing to support airport operations. And so that is not incorporated or reflected currently into the recommended budget brought forward to City Council this evening.
So no maintenance, no anything that we would have otherwise relied on grants for?
At this point in time, we have not incorporated anything with general fund support.
Okay, appreciate that. Next question has to do with shifting sort of big pack capital projects. It was mentioned, obviously the federal and state funding is evaporated, more or less. And so I'm thinking about like our transportation department, since we depend so much on that big money. Are we shifting that work to micro projects or over into more maintenance and stewardship? Again, sort of are we shifting those resources as we maybe pivot or wait for that infrastructure money to come back online again?
We currently have incorporated into the 2026 budget as well as the out year budgets, continued planning with transportation projects supported by grants, including federal grants. We have incorporated, as we shared forward, into the 6-year horizon support for bridge replacement, including the Central Avenue Bridge as well as the Violet Avenue Bridge in CCRS. And we intend to, and as incorporated into the ballot measure for CCRS, for the ballot measure going forward this November, have the opportunity to continue to support transportation maintenance as one of the areas of capital infrastructure across the city's portfolio. So it has been planning across the 6-year horizon, and at this point in time, the funding received from grants are incorporated into out year funds that we have across the organization supporting transportation.
Okay. My last question has to do with the single family housing expansion fee. I'm not sure I recall a policy decision on that, so I'm kind of wondering how that came to be. Because it seems like it's a pretty big policy decision, and so I'm wondering how we how we're folding it into a budget prior to having that policy conversation. So I'm just wondering order of operations, more or less.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And we are actually, staff is planning to come forward with a separate item for city council consideration that will share forward much more detail and have a robust discussion as a distinct item coming forward. I believe the dates are October 23rd. And the beginning of November for city council meetings for council consideration. So while we have incorporated the revenue projections into the 2026 budget, a separate policy item and discussion will come forward in just over a month to city council as a separate standalone item for consideration.
And so that really begs the follow-up question. How is the city prepared to compensate for not having that $400,000 should that policy discussion not move forward with the expansion fee?
It would be an item that we would need to consider if not approved by city council, and take a look across the board and seeing what would need to potentially be adjusted on the expense side within the Affordable Housing Fund for that $400,000.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Look forward to that conversation in October. Thanks.
All right, Mark, you're up, then Taisha.
Okay, I have a couple of questions that do not relate to each other, but first, I want to thank staff for an extraordinary amount of work that they put into this, and the product that they have produced is really quite excellent. And Charlotte, I want to thank you for your extremely detailed response to my hotline. Everything was answered and rather comprehensively, so thank you. My first question is, we now have debt obligations equal to about 80% of our annual budget. In light of the vagaries of revenue streams at this point, is there any particular vulnerability to having this amount of debt?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Wallach. City staff has taken a look across our debt portfolio, and has been very intentional in working particularly across the finance department and with support from our financial advisors of understanding implications of entering into particular debt obligations. We work as we did in the development for Western City Campus most recently with our financial advisors and bond counsel to understand potential risks and implications of accepting and bringing on more debt. We have carefully considered the amount of revenues that are going to support ongoing debt service. And one of the items that we do in looking at bringing on more debt is looking at debt rolling off of the city's books. And we do have some coming forward across the short-term horizon in the next 6 to 10 years and paying off some current obligations that we have.
Okay, thank you. Separate subject. I've been receiving a number of comments relating to the allocations that are being imposed on various departments. And the issue is not so much a dispute over the appropriateness of charging departments, but the basis on which the allocations are being imposed. Do we have a specific formula for doing that?
Yeah, and I believe that you might be referencing our support services cost allocation that's distributed across all funds in the organization. This is, I believe, as we shared forward in the hotline response, a standard governmental practice that distributes support services costs across all operating funds in the organization. So that incorporates not only the general fund, which absorbs about 50% of support services allocation, but also is distributed across operating funds. And so this is an item that is representative of the cost of doing administrative business for the municipality. And to specifically to your point in how we factor, there are multiple factors that go into the cost allocation calculation and model that is updated on an annual basis as part of our budget development process. Two examples that I can point to include FTE count and total budget across funds. And so just sharing forward again, this is a standard governmental practice that's performed across all jurisdictions. And the city of Boulder distributes this across all operating funds, with the general fund receiving about 50% of the total allocable cost.
Don't misunderstand. I wasn't questioning the validity of the allocations. The question was, do we have a good formula for making those allocations, one that is reasonably transparent and understandable?
We do have a breakdown of the distribution factors that are incorporated into the model, and that is updated on an annual basis and is transparent and available. And we're, as mentioned, the two major factors that are incorporated into those distributions include the FTE count and the total budget by fund. And that is updated on an annual basis, and we've performed with advice received from our recent financial consultant in updating the most recent cost allocation, and is updated on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you. My last question has a couple of components to it, and it revolves around the proposed transportation maintenance fee. First, have we done any recent community outreach on this?
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member, and know that the transportation department has done a substantial amount of outreach as part of the work and the development of this fee and leading up to the last council decision making in 2020. And I'll hand it off to Interim Director Valerie Watson. And also just to share forward, prior to tossing off, the fee came forward with review with the Financial Strategy Committee in June of this year and shared forward with the Financial Strategy Committee at that time, and know that the department has been working on an engagement plan and outreach plan with the community. And Valerie, I'll toss it to you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thanks for the question, Councilmember Wallach. If I'm not frozen, I'll continue. Okay, so to answer your question, yes, we have been conducting outreach. I will highlight that there has been over 10 years of intensive community process around the idea of a transportation maintenance fee. It has been repeatedly discussed with the community, with various councils, transportation advisory boards over the years. As late as 2019, there was consensus around moving forward with the transportation maintenance fee. When fast forwarding after the pandemic, as the city was starting to develop its long-term financial strategy and we were looking ahead to the 2026 budget, we picked that thread back up and initiated the fee study that establishes the legal and rational nexus for the fee and how the fee structure would be, its rates. And we have just completed that earlier this year. And so in terms of the outreach around that timeline, we've been doing early conversations and focused discussions with major stakeholders along the way. We've briefed TAB back in May and again this month. And currently, we're really midstream now that we have the completed fee structure to share out with major stakeholders. We are kind of midstream in conducting a lot of focused conversations. Some are being facilitated in partnership with our local Boulder Chamber and Boulder Chamber Transportation Connections. And we really appreciate that partnership. We've been reaching out to some of the major contributors to trips on our transportation system, including CU Boulder, BVSD. So yes, to answer your question, we have been conducting outreach.
Okay, and it's still in process.
Correct. We are really heading for that timeline for October consideration of the ordinance by council and that adoption process.
In looking at this, the proposed uses of these funds look very similar to transportation CIP expenses, which have been drastically cut. Are we essentially using this fee to backfill those budget cuts, or is this something different?
I think we mentioned in the hotline response today that maintenance for transportation has not received any drastic reductions from 2025 to 2026 or year over year. The fluctuation and variability you see in the transportation CIP, which is for capital infrastructure, that variability is due to the types of projects that happen to be programmed in the different years. So depending on the nature of the program, you'll see, those kind of costs fluctuating up and down. It does not reflect a reduction in our operating budget for maintenance. And so we do have a separate operating budget for maintenance that, helps us with near-term needs like pothole patching, things like that. In our transportation CIP, which you asked about specifically, we are maintaining our levels of funding, if not increasing them slightly, to try to address cost escalation and inflation. So things like our pavement management program, things like our sidewalk programs, those are not seeing any kind of reductions.
Okay, thank you. That's what I got.
Thank you. Taisha, you are up.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I just had a couple of questions. The first was around the revenue forecasts. I was curious what the anticipated cause was for the bump that was anticipated in like 2029. It was like a $10 million bump or something. It made me curious about what informed these sales revenue forecasts.
Yeah, thank you for the question. In our presentation, we incorporate in the presentation on the breakdown of the sales and use tax, we incorporated general fund only as the snapshot. In 2029, there is a shift of a transportation dedicated tax to the general fund. And so that is what is that large increase in 2029 is that that shift of realignment of dedicated tax to the general fund.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I didn't put those together. Um, I had a question about the restricted funds. I just in general would love to see more delineation that's in the comment section because I just remember last year just being so reminded about the restricted funds. So it was hard to delineate which ones were and which ones weren't. If I could just get like a quick refresher on just the restricted, maybe like what areas are the most in restricted funds or just kind of getting some bearings in that would be really helpful.
Yeah, and is it helpful to provide a high level at this point in
Yeah, but
response?
just yeah, and then later on, maybe having something a little bit more detailed around that specific question, because I think that's an area for growth.
Yeah,
Growth
so
there.
as a reminder, in terms of the restricted revenues within the city of Boulder, the city of Boulder's revenues are a high amount of restrictions at about 68%. Sales and use tax, when we are specifically looking at sales and use tax, the total amount of restrictions is I believe it's 56% is restricted for sales and use tax for specific purposes. That includes arts, culture, and heritage. It includes specific sales tax supporting parks for open space as well as transportation and the CCRS fund. If we were just to look at the sales and use tax pie, there's a total amount of funds of 6 funds with that breakdown of 56% of the sales and use tax pie being dedicated within the city of Boulder.
Okay, thank you very much. I had a question about FEMA. I had just in general, just some of the changes that are happening federally to that program so that it's restricting some of the activity uses that would have previously been reimbursed. And so it's my understanding that we have historically leaned on reserves to cover some of those upfront costs and then we're reimbursed later. And so I was just curious, as far as like scenarios, if some of that had been considered in, or if the reserves are robust enough that that's not a concern at this point.
Yeah, thank you for the question, council member. It is something that the city will need to take into account and consider. It is something I will share that we have been closely monitoring since January of this year and understanding what potential impacts there might be to outstanding liabilities that we have not yet received reimbursement for. And so it is something that we recognize we need to consider as part of our financial planning. We continue to closely monitor it to understand what our risk exposure is related to outstanding grant liabilities that we have not yet been reimbursed for. And Teresa, or I'm not sure if others want to join in to share additional detail, but that in summary shares forward. Yeah.
That's good for me at this point, unless there's something that you feel like the public should, or my colleagues and myself should know at this point. But I do think going forward that will be an area that I would, how much of our reserves, like, just, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
based
I'll just add that we're monitoring,
historically.
yeah.
Yeah, based historically, how much, we do what we can. Okay, so that's that one. I actually didn't have a whole bunch. Oh, Elevate Boulder. I just, almost didn't want to mention it, but because I was looking for it and I didn't find it. But that's just because, sometimes I get lost in there. Is this, I think we're in their final year, right?
Yeah, I'll share forward a very brief overview and then toss it over to Elizabeth. We did not the part of the decision making, the challenges of bringing forward the balanced budget was taking a look across the board at our programming, particularly programming supported by ARPA funds, one-time funds, and recognizing the challenges of bringing forward the balanced budget. And so the 2026 recommended budget does not incorporate city funding for Elevate Boulder, but we do have the opportunity to support if the private sector were to come forward to support Elevate Boulder. And I'll toss to Elizabeth to share forward just current status of Elevate Boulder and other details as well.
Sure. Thank you, Charlotte. I will start off by saying that the final data evaluation report for the project is going to be released publicly next week. So you'll be able to look at that. The project's going very well, and the final payments are going out to participants on December 31st. So it is coming to a close. As Charlotte said, we are hoping to, and has been our plan for quite a while, to try to transition the program from a pilot project to at least having another cohort or two. We've been working with nonprofit partners, folks who served on the initial community task force, other community members, and looking at input for participants to think about what we might change if it moves forward. But most critically, it needs to be a public and private partnership. That's been the most successful formula for most pilot projects or most guaranteed income projects in the country, regardless of exactly who they serve or with how much funding. So that is our goal. And as Charlotte said, if we are successful in getting a decent, portion, half or more of next cohort budget from the private sector, that will hopefully be able to unlock some city funds in reserve for us to use.
All right. Thank you very much. I will reserve comment for later. And that's all the questions I have at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we've got Lauren up next. She's having some internet issues, but I think she's here to ask questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. So I really appreciated getting to hear all the answers to my colleagues' questions and to the hotlines. Everyone covered a lot already, but I was hoping, I just had a couple small ones. The CRM system that gets talked about, when do we expect that to be implemented? I see that it's funded over, I believe, 6 years. And is that something that we will have in 6 years, or is that something that we will be able to transition to sooner than that?
Yes, thank you for the question, council member. So the constituent relationship management project is planned for 2026 and 2027. And so the project funding is associated with those 2 years in the CIP, and it's directly in line with the development and the opening of the Western City campus plan for 2027. And so it's just for those 2 years.
So the public won't have access to the new system until 2027 when the new building opens?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Because that is something I hear a lot about from community, just the difficulty getting a hold of people and getting questions answered. So I look forward to that. And then my other question was about urban park rangers. And I was hoping that maybe, Allie, you could remind me a little bit more of what they do. Mostly I see them doing like off-leash dog tickets, and I was just a little surprised with the sort of budget constraints that we are in that that was being maintained at the same level. So if you could maybe provide a little bit more about some of the other services they provide, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. I don't have at my fingertips their current patrol breakdowns, but I know that more than 50% of it is in our downtown parks and supporting downtown community events such as the farmers market, Bands on the Bricks. They're very integral part of our Safe and Managed Public Spaces program. They are a force multiplier in supporting the lawful implementation of the city's camping ban and other things. The other thing I'll note is that they also support programs across the city. So for example, this summer there was a cardiac event at the North Boulder Recreation Center, and they were there and helping with crowd control while the emergency responders were supporting response there. I'd love to follow up with you offline and learn more about what you're seeing, but and then the other thing I'll just note is that off-leash dogs is one of the #1 complaints that we get from park visitors.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Allie. That's it for my questions.
All right, great, thank you. I just have a couple questions, and then we can kind of check in on time and hopefully head into our next question, or our next question from staff. Also, thank you to the Channel 8 folks for getting Channel 8 back up and running. Really appreciate that. Okay, so I just had a couple questions. One is with some of the EPRAS funding, the eviction prevention and rental assistance, going to the building home program to help prevent evictions there. Does this mean that there's going to be less funding in 2026 for other eviction prevention?
For the 2026 budget, building home was strategically decided to be funded with utilizing EPRAS funding from the Eviction Prevention and Rental Assistance Program fund. And the 2026 funding will not impact and reduce other support that would go toward rental assistance. We are utilizing available funds in the fund to be able to support building home on a one-time basis in 2026.
Okay, cool, thank you. And then just a question around, because some folks have asked about fees and things. If some of the fees weren't included, so for example, if we decided not to do the impact fee on single family home expansion, after all, despite having moved it forward for a few years, what happens? Or if we decide not to approve the transportation maintenance fee, what does that mean for the things that they would have supported? Do we send you all back to the drawing board or the Jenga tower, as it seems to be this year, to shuffle things around? Or does it just mean that we'll have less for the things that they're currently slotted to fund?
If we reduced the fees, staff was very intentional of the alternative funding revenues brought forward and included in the projections for 2026. And so if there are changes to the revenues in the 2026 budget, we will need to take a look at what that means for expenses on the expense side.
Okay, and then specifically the expenses that were sort of tied to those in the first place.
That's correct.
All right, okay, great, thank you.
Nicole, can I colloquy off of that?
Yep.
Okay. So I know you answered this, Charlotte, but I didn't understand what you were saying. So I'm going to ask again in just simpler language. Tell me, no, you use simple, not me. I always use simple language. That's what I'm saying. Tell me the $400,000 that is included in the 2026 budget on something we didn't yet agree. That $400,000, what exactly is it going to be used for?
I will need to lean on our staff in Housing and Human Services, but it will go to support affordable housing.
That I know. I just want to know what about it.
And we are happy to follow up as well if needed. And I see Principal Budget Analyst Ken Baird coming off.
Yeah, thank you, Charlotte. Ken Baird with HHS Finance. And the $400,000 was the initial amount for implementation of this fee next year. for new permits. So we don't expect revenue, if the fee is to be passed, revenue to be coming in until towards the end of the year. And that 400,000, it's an estimate that's in the fund financial. Right now, it's slated that would actually go to fund balance to fund future years affordable housing. It's not appropriated in 2026 for being used on specific projects.
Okay, so we're gonna charge this fee for the future affordable housing. Check.
Yeah, I would go into the fund balance for future projects.
Fund balance. Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, that's all of my questions. So I think we have hopefully exhausted the first part about just our questions around the city budget. Our next question is, do council members recommend any substantive changes in advance of the budget's first reading on October 9th? And what I would ask with this one, I think it would be good just for all of us to go around and say either yes or no. If your answer to that question, which is also in the chat, is yes, please say more about what your change recommendations are, and then give your overall comments. If your answer is no, just say no, and then please give your overall comments. So we're kind of going to combine budget comments with answering this question. So I will open it up for hands on who would like to go first. I see Ryan. That gives other people a chance to queue up.
Wait, just point of clarification
yeah.
first.
Mhm.
Sorry, Ryan. Just like, how are we quantifying substantive? I guess is where I'm going with this. Like, what's the substantive line? Thank you.
That's a good question. Staff, can we get some guidance there?
Yeah, I think in sharing forward what we have shared in the presentation, the budget is balanced. And so if there is truly any change to the budget, we will need we will need to identify an offset. And so it would be any change coming forward.
So basically anything that's more than 0. Okay, thank you. And thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yes.
Good clarification.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay,
Any question?
Okay, my answer is no changes. I think this body of work is very comprehensive. I have a lot of confidence in it, and seeing the connectivity with the outcomes-based approach, I think this is, I wouldn't know why or where to try to change things. So my mind is open, and I'll be listening to colleagues, but no, I wouldn't suggest to change a thing. And I just have one comment on the transportation maintenance fee. And this is something I heard about when I was on tab that was like years overdue when I was on tab. And I just think given the concerns and the needs about transportation that we hear from the community across all of the ways people use transportation, this is one of the systems that we are in the greatest need of more directly allocating the costs of the use of the system to what we have to expend. And just for what it's worth, one thing I learned in this process is part of one's impact on the transportation system is, of course, the way that they get around directly. But it's also when you go to a restaurant, you go to use a service, the people that are working there have used the system to get there. And furthermore, if you're using Amazon or any kind of delivery, that's all part of the system too. So I had learned that, and I just wanted to share. So I'm very supportive of it. I think it's quite sophisticated compared to the way other towns have done so far, which is great for Boulder. And I would just end by saying, in the future, I will be excited to look for ways to even to refine the way that the impacts are allocated, and that we're able to differentiate the way the different users weigh in on the system. But for now, I think it's a really wonderful framework to get started with.
Thanks, Ryan. Next up, Mark, then Tara.
Of course, there are things I would do differently, but I'm not going to go there. I don't think I want to second guess the vast amount of work that's gone into this, and I'm going to rely upon staff's decisions on this. As I said, I could give you, several things I would do if it were just my preference, but I'm not going to do that. I just, I don't think my judgment is going to be better than theirs. And I want to rely upon this prodigious body of work that's been done to get us on a firmer financial footing. So I'm going to keep those changes to myself and rely upon this document to move forward.
Thank you, Mark. Tara, you're up, then Tina and Matt.
I keep forgetting to put on my mute. So can you remind me if I do that again?
Yeah, I haven't noticed it being off though.
Oh, okay. So I think it's a good budget. I disagree with the fees. And I'm just going to quickly say why, not a whole long story, which I think we'll save for some other time. But first of all, the single family housing expansion fee, that is not an emergency because it's for the future affordable housing. So in my opinion, we're saying to many middle-class people who bought a tiny home and want to, let's say, add a bunch of bedrooms for their kids or whatever, we're saying, can you, family, pay for affordable housing? And I just don't think it's right. So I just feel like whatever we have now, I just don't agree with. I'm not saying I would never agree with it because I do believe that fees are important, but this I don't agree with. So that's first of all. And then secondly, the transportation maintenance fee. It really is, I get that it's been around for 10 years or so, but we have had COVID. COVID has strained businesses to the point where margins are really, really tight for a lot of businesses. And now we're asking them to pay yet more for this transportation maintenance fee. So what I'm asking is not to get rid of it, but to consider, does it have to be this high? How are businesses affected? What are businesses saying about it? By businesses, I specifically mean local businesses, not Amazon. No offense to Amazon, but they have plenty of money. So that's where I stand with the transportation maintenance fee. And it does some good, but I don't want it to affect our small businesses, our minority businesses. And I'm not sure, I just want to go over with or maybe get information on exactly how much that means, because every fee, it's like fees aren't free. It's not like free money. People have to pay the fee. And the people, especially businesses, have a lot of fees that they pay, not just this fee, and every fee adds up and it becomes more and less. It comes harder and harder for regular small businesses to have a business here in Boulder with all of our fees. I know I'm passionate about this, but I've heard community members complain about this who have small businesses for a really long time. So I have a level of frustration. So excuse my passion. And then lastly, I would like to say the parking fees. I've heard you say the word modest 50 cents. I don't know how many times tonight, but considering that we just doubled the parking and doubled on the street, and now we're raising it again 50 cents, what that says to me is only privileged people can park on Pearl Street because it's really too expensive for most people to now park on Pearl Street with the double plus 50 cents. And then where does it end? Are we going to do 50 cents a year? I come from Philadelphia where the parking was so expensive that people didn't even want to go downtown. I mean, it was like $15 an hour, some crazy thing like that. But what I loved about Boulder is it's not expensive to go downtown. And I just want everyone to understand that there was a big increase in parking. And the question is do we have to really do another 50 cents? That's how I feel. All right.
So Kara, just to clarify for staff,
Did I do that for no reason?
No. I'm just what I'm wondering is because it sounds like what you're proposing is to not put fee increases or new fees into the budget which would have a reduction of things like fixing roads and stuff like that.
Just to be clear, single family housing expansion fee has nothing to do with fixing roads. It has to do with future building.
Correct. Yes.
So that's first of all.
Yes. Yeah. But the transportation one does though, right? So I just, because
So what I'm saying is I want to see a realignment. I don't like that it's heavily so much on small businesses, and I would like to see, I believe that it's a good thing. I just will like to see more information on how it affects small businesses as to, or can we do something with it to make it fairer for our small businesses? I'm not against that fee. I just don't, I'm worried it's going to be one more fee against small businesses, and I just want to see if we can realign it and maybe put more onus on the bigger corporations.
Okay, so then I think maybe this would be one of those follow-up with staff things to figure that out. But I think with the Nexus studies, there may be some more to dive into there. So that's a follow-up, and then make sure to send out whatever you come up with on hotline by, can you remind me of the date, Charlotte? October.
Yeah, we're hoping by
You're saying I
October,
need to, wait,
October
I need
6th.
to write a hotline? Oh,
Yeah. You got to figure out where that money is coming from, then send out a hotline telling us before the budget comes along.
you bet.
So, okay, cool. And did you have any other comments, Tara? Okay, cool.
Great budget, other than that.
Okay. Next up then, we've got Tina, Matt, and then Taisha.
Yeah, I'll echo that this is a really good budget, and I don't know. I really looked forward to this study session and hearing all the different thoughts from council. So I'm not going to say definitively yes or no. And I did read the email that we have until October 6th to put those ideas out on hotline. I also just really appreciated that the reductions and the increases for each area were very clear, and that they showed a direct connection to what the outcomes would be. So I really appreciated that. The one thing that that is a little harder is that when I think about human services, we're part of a system with the county, and they're providing a lot of similar services or duplicative services that duplicate meaning augmenting, not redundant. That's not my intention. And it might make sense at some point, and whether this is a council priority or part of the budget, to be able to craft a vision that shows how the investments by both entities are working together on what's effectively the same population, especially considering that the bulk of a lot of the people needing services are in fact located in the city of Boulder. So being able to tell that narrative to the community in a better way for me would be extremely helpful. Right now, I have a hard time saying to the community, I know that the city provides this and the county provides this, and that together these investments make a lot of sense, and I'm really, really clear on the outcomes. I'm not quite there yet, and so that's something I could use help with as we think about how we're serving our community the best that we can. So again, I don't know if it's a priority or if it's something that can happen during budget, but our budget certainly does not exist in isolation. And there are other investments happening, especially in the human services area, that aren't really reflected in this budget. But otherwise, I think it's great. Oh, and the county has come up a couple times. My core belief is that we're facing a really hard time for the next 3 years, and that we need to be working together, honestly, closer than ever. And we can do that in part by understanding our individual and ultimately our collaborative impacts on the community during this really challenging time. And I think it's up to us to take on that challenge. But other than that, this was really good. And I really, really appreciated all the work in it. And I think if it answers that question, are we creating systems that show that you can have trust in government? This budget would be a good example of one where I feel like I have a lot of trust in my local government. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Next up, Matt, then Taisha, then Lauren.
Well, I'm super glad Tina has trust in our local government. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm really happy about that. It's a thoughtful budget, and it's difficult. And I think that there were some really important trade-offs that were done. So when it comes to anything that I would recommend different, I mean, the fact that we're going to have a conversation about the residential expansion fee in October, I'm good with that conversation. If I were to say one thing, and I have said it each and every year on council, is that our budget is not very accessible and transparent for our community. I know it is when we talk about it, but it isn't in terms of going online. It is still extraordinarily difficult for people to find the information they're looking for. And the simplest thing, like a search function, I know I've mentioned it. This is in the day of tech and AI and every darn tool that's out there. Putting a search function on the open.gov has got to be a top priority so people can just search the word they want and see all of the information. But the fact that you've got to find the random family tree to get the information you need makes that barrier of entry difficult for people to feel that it's transparent. So that's the only thing that I would really ask, is that we really move in earnest to think about user experience with our budget. And if that needs to be a future working group or a collab of people, that is going to make our job easier, because it won't seem like there's a curtain of Oz that our budget is done for. I know it's not, because we do it, but our community doesn't see that work day in, day out. It's when they see it online that they go, oh, this is hard. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would just kind of keep us working towards, is that transparency and accessibility for the budget, because then it makes our jobs easier in evangelizing the great work that city staff are doing, and meeting our priorities and outcome-based budgeting. So great job. And one day I will see that search function. I appreciate it. Thanks. Great job.
All right, next up, Taisha, then Lauren. Then I've got some comments.
Awesome, thank you. I concur with a lot of my colleagues' comments regarding the quality of the budget, the thoughtfulness and the alignments. I also appreciate having time to better formulate recommended changes, understand that any change would require recommendations, or understanding that there are definitely give and take, but just some areas, some general areas. When I was thinking about the community, climate and resilience, and whatever S stands for, tax, and 10% go to nonprofit, for example. I just, we know our nonprofits are going to be slammed, they have been disproportionately impacted by the governmental shifts at the federal level. And so I just wanted to lift that up as a place where, when I was looking at some of the other items there, again, going back to Tara's earlier comment, this is urgent and important. If it's not urgent and important, if it's something that can wait a year or two, I'm willing to do that and ensure that we have our community members who are already struggling to not be able to live here, right? And I'm talking about essential workers here. This is nurses, teachers, the ones that can still afford to live here. When they leave, they don't come back. And they get replaced by people who are not essential workers, no shade. And so as our community continues to talk about affordability, I'm not seeing it in this budget. I mean, I'm seeing lots of great effort, but when I see where $1 million are invested versus hundreds of thousands, it tends to be those things that are more human services focused. And the elimination of Elevate Boulder, a program, earned income-based programs. We talk about evidence and the importance of evidence-based decision making. Well, the evidence is absolutely clear on the impacts of those types of programs. And so to see that was something that wasn't able to make it, when we talk about affordability, when we talk about racial equity, when we talk about equity with large, people with disabilities, these are the people that rely on, that have been able to feed their families, been able to pay childcare bills with those kinds of funds. So I'm hopeful that we can really look to see what is urgent and important versus nice to have. And I'm not suggesting that you didn't do that work, but I am suggesting that I'm willing, and I hope some of my colleagues, four of my other colleagues, are at least are willing to allow some projects to be delayed. I feel like this is still a business as usual, only a couple of year bump. This is significant. This is depression, recession. This is documented, well documented. Not to mention the silent recession, formerly known as white collar recession. I've heard from many community members who have lost their jobs in our city, who are making very good money. Both family members have lost their jobs. And so, I mean, eventually, you know, that is going to have a significant impact. And so when those benefits and things start to run down. So I would just love us to really meet the moment. Another example would be this constituent resource management, $1.7 million. Again, right? I love to make sure that I love systems. I love cleaning up a system. But again, I look forward to providing more specific recommendations moving forward. But just wanted to tee up that those are some of the areas, and I'll be using the sustainability, equity, and reliability outcomes, and note here that most of those outcomes are actually outputs. And so I'm hopeful in the updates when I look at them that there will be more outcomes data that talks about the actual impacts of the investments that are being made. But overall, exceptional work. It's just, unfortunately, given the economic situation that we find ourselves in, as well as the environmental. Remember my FEMA comment from before. It just takes a couple and all of this. And so I would rather make the harder trade-off, investing in our people, investing in our planet as much as we invest in our planet and in our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lauren, you're up.
Thanks. I was back for a second with the internet, but then I lost it again. So appreciate you all bearing with me. I thought this was a very thoughtful and balanced budget recommendation, and I appreciate all of the tremendous amount of staff work that has gone on to get us here. I did really appreciate Matt's comment about the user experience of the budget. I know I also hear that a lot from community members and struggle a bit myself with it. I also appreciated Taisha's comments about making sure our social safety net is funded to a degree that we can help our community members with the economic hardships that they're facing right now. And Tina's comments made me wonder about, you know, as part of this budget process, we talked a little bit about not duplicating services that the county already provides, but when we're relying on them so intensely for that, I wonder about maybe trying to set up an MOU or some sort of agreement around expectations and notifications around, because I know they are also facing funding challenges, and I wouldn't want to see us really counting on them providing a service that ends up being scaled back or cut. And so what kind of strategy do we have there to make sure that we have knowledge ahead of time to the extent we're able about any changes there? But overall, I didn't have any major changes that I would like to put forward. I really, again, appreciate staff's work. Thank you.
Great. I will just wrap it up. I kind of like Mark, sure, there are things that, you know, I would change. And also, this is it really does feel like a Jenga tower. Staff, you know, I kind of see the ways that you've pulled out pieces and stuck them in different places. And it feels like you've gotten it to work. And that's amazing and incredible. And I am reluctant to be the one that tries to pull something out and knocks over the whole tower. And I just want to say, you know, there's so many cities that are facing layoffs right now, significant cuts to all kinds of services, and structural deficits. And we are in a much stronger position because of all the work that you all have been doing to transform our budgeting process. I can't express my gratitude enough, in saying that this is your leadership and in getting us to this place where we are more stable, as we are in some chaos, head into potentially more chaos. You've really protected a lot of our essential services while still advancing our strategic goals and our council and you've kept our biggest asset, which is our staff, including all of you. I know this process is still evolving. Getting it into our budget into OpenGov took over a year. Getting things into the sustainability, equity, and resilience framework also took a year. And then generating initial outcomes for every program and service took another year. But we're at a point where our decisions are starting to align with our goals, and it's really exciting to see that. And I think the other thing that stands out for me with this budget is, especially with almost 70% of our funds being restricted, that we cannot move them around to different programs or services, no matter how big the need is. This is really impressive work. And I really just cannot thank you enough. That feel like we need to have a parade. If it didn't cost so much, we could have a parade for you downtown. Just thank you for preserving so much of our city in this really challenging time. And I also just want to thank my colleagues, because we've all been very supportive of this process over the years as staff has worked to clean up. So anyway, thank you to everybody. This is truly amazing. And I cannot imagine what a different place we would be in if you hadn't made all these changes in how we budget over the years. So thank you. Does anybody have any final comments, thoughts?
I appreciate that. And I just want to piggyback on your last comment, Councilmember Spear, that we could not do this without your support. The kind of decisions that we are making require the kind of support that only you all can give us, because these are big changes and big shifts and hard decisions. And so we appreciate it. We take your feedback, and we look forward to continued conversations. So thank you all.
Thank you. So I would just ask staff if there's anything else you need from us, and if not, if you wouldn't mind just refreshing us on what we need to do as a next step before this comes back to us at a public hearing.
Thanks for the question, council members. So as a reminder, for any questions that you all have as we're heading to the first public hearing, budget hearing on October 9th, please feel free to reach out to us in the budget office. We're happy to answer any questions or coordinate questions. If there are any changes at all that council members are interested in looking at, we can help to discuss and take a look at that together. And just as a reminder, an identified offset would be needed for any changes, and we are requesting council members to share those forward by October 6th via hotline.
Great. And just to clarify, Charlotte, we are the ones who are responsible with figuring this out, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thanks.
We're available for questions.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else that you need from us, staff?
Not at this time. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nuria, Krista, Charlotte, Scott. Really appreciate this presentation and all of your time tonight. With no other items on tonight's agenda, I will close this meeting at 8:22 p.m. Thanks, everyone. Oh, Taisha, yeah, you have your hand up? Okay, all right. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Great job, Nicole.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.